Sorry. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Pam McElvain. I'm the CEO of Diversity MBA Media and Learning Solutions. And I'm so happy this morning to have with me Germaine Hunter, the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Marathon Petroleum. Good morning, Germaine.
Good morning, Pam. How are you?
I'm so good. It's so good to have you. I know I'm feeling a bit of joy. We just finished our healthcare summit and it was a huge success, talking about health equity and the impact of that. So when I think about that, it just makes me, think about how are you today in this, I have to say, this fast-paced environment that we're in, hybrid environment that we're in. How are you keeping yourself well?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Things are moving quickly, and it is certainly a challenge for me, as I know it is for others, to kind of find the time and the space to think about your own personal wellness. For me, it's really less about like big showy things that I do and more about making smaller decisions in the course of every day and every week. On the professional side, one of the things that I would tell you I've made a real conscious effort to do over these last handful of years is make sure that I'm blocking each day on my calendar some amount of time for just quiet work or quiet reflection. I would often find that I would look at my calendar in the morning and be scheduled back to back to back to back in meeting after meeting after meeting, and only to come to the end of the day and find myself personally drained, emotionally drained, and staring at a mountain of tasks and activities that still needed to be completed, which inevitably bled into my family time. And so getting really thoughtful about how I manage time has been critical. On the personal side, I would say that, I'm like a million other people out there that in the midst of COVID, I became a huge Peloton devotee. So I try to make sure that I'm getting onto my Peloton every morning and trying to chase personal bests as often as I can. And that I think that just kind of release of endorphins is I've found to be really important for me, and something that I try to be as disciplined about as I can.
I love that. I love that. And, and being unapologetic about, self-care. If you don't have self-interest about your own self-care, we're not going to change the balance. So what are you doing to encourage your workforce to do the same?
Yeah. We're there's a number of things that we're doing to try to help folks really engage in their wellness. And one of the things that we're really encouraging is much more robust, healthier conversations with folks that we want our folks to have with their leaders, with their managers about the balance between work and life. I'm a big believer in this idea that we are moving into an era of work-life integration where the boundaries between work and life are going to become much more blurry. And so while that's going to require a different set of skills for all of us to manage through, it's also going to, I think, create some new opportunities for people to work in different ways and to find their own individual paths to achieving that type of balance. So, I think that's really important. The other thing that we're doing as an organization is we're thinking and looking very critically at our benefits and rewards for our employees and trying to ensure that they are structured in a way to reinforce this need for personal wellness. One of the big announcements that we made recently is that we are now offering all new hires to our organization an additional week of vacation, and we're grandfathering existing employees that additional week at different levels of tenure. And
wow.
So, it's just one kind of very tactical way in which we're trying to reinforce the importance of wellness for our employees.
Well, I like the fact that you actually, regardless of what organization you're from, but that you intentionally went back and said, what do we have within our existing benefit structure that we can enhance? Mm-hmm. And for me, that's like a leading practice. And I'll tell you, some companies are, have continued to embed the pandemic COVID practices that they didn't have before. and enhance them. But I think that's great, right, PTO is becoming huge, and how to respect that. So thank you for sharing that. I often like to, have our experts share a little bit about your background. I'm particularly like the blended background that you bring to the space, because oftentimes organizations put business leaders in the diversity role that a lot of folks, the perception is that they're not prepared, they may have the influence, but do they have the competence? And so in sharing a little bit of your background and journey, what actually inspired you to end up where you are now?
Yeah, I think my background is unique in some ways, in that I have found myself in a role that I did not necessarily envision. However, as I've learned more, it actually is similar to many other folks in the DE&I space. I started my career in the consumer packaged goods industry, and really always envisioned myself taking on greater levels of responsibility and leadership, with the goal of ultimately running a very large business and a very large organization. I started my career at Procter and Gamble, which was a great, phenomenal learning experience and training ground for me. But at the same time that I was kind of honing my core business skills, I also had this very deep personal appreciation for the privilege that I had been granted as a Black man working in a very large Fortune 500 company, which not many people had the opportunity to do. And so I felt like I needed to use that privilege, to use that voice in some meaningful way. And so, my personal DE&I story really began as a member of an employee resource group. That was my very first entree into this space. And um, I engaged in that work, really from the very get-go of my career. But my more formal transition into DE&I work happened when I was at the Clorox company, when I was part of a small group of employees who were advising our CEO at the time on DE&I issues. And through those series of conversations, I was eventually invited to take on a formal role as the enterprise leader, for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would say that in hindsight, that's probably one of the best career choices I ever made. It's given me the opportunity to kind of pair up the technical experiences that I've had with, in a space that I think has so much meaning and impact on so many people. So it's been a great challenge and a great opportunity.
Yeah, what I love though about, and I'll just say this, is, without being actually trained for this particular role, you have actually been positioned for it. You have the leadership competencies, you have the exposure of, what it takes at, a tactical level to integrate DEI and cultural functions, being a part of an ERG, and then also, advising at the highest level, what are the strategies to influence change in the organization. So that so much makes sense to me, why you're so fit for this role. Coming from an organization, that like a Clorox or Procter and Gamble, that, they've been on the journey of maturity for diversity, equity, inclusion for a long time. And now moving into an industry, and I will tell you, in our index in 2022, we had about 25% new companies that participated from non-traditional workforces for women. So railroad, energy, an increased number of energy manufacturing organizations that participated. And we found that they were predominantly, Germaine, white. Of course, the dominant group was white, but the dominant group in leadership was white men, not even yet where you had a lot of the gender diversity for white women, but and or women in general. Also, the workforce was pretty dominant with men. In some cases, white men, in other cases, just, even though a lot of diversity, just men, and not traditional for women. So moving into an industry, I say all that to say, you're in an industry, an organization as well, that, starting on the journey, what are some of the things that from a strategic positioning alignment that you had to, first establish, to begin to bring forward the journey of, or the integration of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I would say, and you're right. I guess one of the things I've gained a deep appreciation for over the last 15 months that I've been here at Marathon is just how deep some of those differences are across different industry groups. Each industry has its own flavor, its own feel, its own set of challenges, its own set of strengths. And the two industries that I've worked in are no different than any others out there in that regard. For us, I think it was really important, or at least for me at the outset of my tenure, to really help establish kind of focus areas for our efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we laid down three pillars of our strategy that were first focused on diversifying our workforce. Second, creating an inclusive culture, one that's accommodating and welcoming of all different types of people. And third, on our communities and making sure that we're reinforcing the value that we create for our communities and then partnering with those communities to generate value back inside of our organization. And so those three pillars really guide the work that we do. As I think about some of the nuances that shape our efforts within the energy space, I think you touched on a couple of things that are very relevant. Our organization and our industry is a engineering dominant space, right? We rely on having world-class engineers to help lead and grow our businesses. And yet across the United States today, we know that a disproportionate number of engineering university graduates are men. And so as we think about our path forward to achieving the type of gender diversity that I think we all aspire for, really, we're thinking about it on two different levels. One is, how do we make sure that we are being the best possible organization that we can be, that we're creating programs and roles and opportunities that are as attractive to men and women as they can possibly be. And then separately, how can we play a role in making access to our industry and access to the types of jobs that we know will exist in the future available to women who have historically not participated in a lot of the training programs that feed people into companies like Marathon. And so we're playing in both of those camps. And I think we're going to have to continue to pursue success in both spaces if we're going to meet our long-term goals.
So what are, just want to stay on that point for a moment. One of I have to say, it's a leading practice now that a number of major companies said, you know what, we're just not getting the talent pipeline that we need. I think of Diageo, VF Corporation, some of the top insurance companies, they did say we're just not getting the pipeline that we need to come into this. So what both of these, I mean, a number, I think I can think of about a dozen. It's not across the marketplace yet, but what they did was said, you know what, we're going to invest in the infrastructure of HBCUs and HSIs so that we can begin to create awareness, develop the talent and pipeline that we need, and hopefully, they're going to come into our organization. But we really have to try to curate our own talent for our own industry. So what do you think about that as a real, option for your industry and for Marathon?
Yeah, I think many of us who have jobs like mine have a very similar view of the world, and we're all trying to chase down solutions in very similar ways. At Marathon, we're doing a lot of that same type of work. We are very active participants in the American Petroleum Industry, Institute, which has done I think, some really, really good work in helping bring together different players within our industry to start thinking about how we can tackle common problems, like our shared goal to create greater diversity within our ranks. And so by coming together in ways that are very appropriate for different companies to come together, we're starting to pursue solutions and build out programs that are going to help float all of the boats in the energy industry, so that no one organization, no one company is having to bear 100% of the burden all by themselves. Like, I think we're recognizing, certainly in this DE&I space, that we're all better off together than separate. And so we're working to create some solutions in that way. And I think we've just started scratching the surface. I think we're going to have tons of new opportunities as time goes on, as we learn more, frankly, as the market continues to evolve.
Yes.
And so I think as an industry, we're trying to position ourselves to take advantage of those emerging trends, those emerging workforce trends,
Yes.
so that we can make opportunities available to as many different people from as many different backgrounds as we possibly can.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a real I think that's encouraging, because it's an approach that the industry is taking, versus one person, one company or two companies. So just want to shift a little bit. What in turn, thank you for sharing, the pillars, because I think that's important to establish those. But what are, and I do know, diversity, education and awareness among your team and talent acquisition and management. So because you also manage talent acquisition in your role, what are you seeing as, or shall I just say, what are a couple of the key initiatives as a new company in the journey, just to help other organizations, gain what things they could think about doing that you had to do as you started to build this department, to some of the things that you looked at first in establishing what your next steps would be?
Mm-hmm. So a couple things that I would say. First and foremost, it's been really important for us to take a data-based approach to the work of DE&I. And I think that's something that sometimes gets missed. But I think without a really rich understanding of what's truly happening in your organization and how your workforce is responding to different pressures and tensions, it's difficult to point in the right direction. So we've spent a lot of time over these last 15 months going deep from a people analytics standpoint. We've staffed up a new HR information system, which wasn't done exclusively for DE&I purposes, but we're the beneficiaries of that work, and that it gives us a much deeper, richer understanding of who's in our company, where they work, what experiences they're having. Over time, it's going to allow us to do broader analysis on things like disparate impacts and performance ratings, pay equity, right? Data is one of the unspoken capabilities that we don't talk about a lot in DE&I circles. And frankly, I think as DE&I leaders, we need to do more. We need to talk about it more. And frankly, we may even need to up our own games as a community, because data, for me at least, is the foundation of so many things. The second thing
I was going to say that is so, on the data point before you leave it, that is so critical. And now we're actually identifying and telling companies, if your HR or HSI system is more than 20 years old, you need to really consider reinvesting in it. And I think that's your business mind that says, let's do the examination first. Look at go deep in the data dive. So, and I appreciate you also being honest and saying, hey, I think, DEI leaders need to develop an acumen. And that's good to hear, because then that's something, that we can look at how we support better. But yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I talk a lot about how DEI work is really this marriage between the heart and the mind. And I think for many of us who work in this space, the heart piece comes easy because it is personal, it is human, it touches the lives of our communities, and we inherently want to make things better. I think there's this opportunity to marry that passion and that heart with the head, with the mind, and that's where I think building out our data and analytics capabilities to begin to get more granular about how we identify problems and then how we solve them. I think we have to continually work to match and marry those things up, the heart and the mind, the heart and the mind. That's how I coach and am working to cultivate my team. Hopefully over time that'll continue to yield the results that we want. But I think it's critically important.
Yeah, I like the approach, when you're thinking about, they talk about the head, heart, connecting and changing of mindsets, right? And the behaviors, how important that is. So I like the fact that you're trying to instill that within the work that your folks do. I think that's fairly critical. One of the things that I will definitely say, that what you're doing in looking at ideation and innovation and how you approach this work is a concept, in design thinking that we're doing in terms of bringing forward. So I'm really happy to hear the approach. And then again, I give that to your business acumen that you're bringing that forward from that perspective and identifying what the big gaps are. So when what are some of the, so now, you have this workforce that is now becoming familiar with the appreciation. They've always might have appreciated cognitive diversity without knowing it, perspectives and the appreciation of, differences. And now they're beginning it. What are some of the initiatives for organizational awareness that you guys have seen success in, that you've established and you've been there for
about 15 months now.
15 months, yeah.
And so, one of the things we started by doing was taking a really deep examination of our employee networks, or we call them employee networks, or our employee resource groups, to really understand what effectiveness they can drive. And we've been on a journey to really transform them into instruments of positive change in the organization, to really empower them to drive kind of the evolution of our culture. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to develop leaders of our employee network, standardize our processes, create points of connectivity and commonality so that we can really exploit the intersectional interests of each of those groups to have a bigger impact overall in the organization. And so I think that's been really, really important. The second thing that I would tell you we're really focused on from an awareness standpoint is creating a common language around bias. And so we have been working with an external partner and testing a platform that's going to help us create a common way to speak and think about bias, one that I think is potentially less challenging than many of the frameworks that exist out there in the world, but that really, at the same time, I think will allow us to get to the heart of challenging folks to think differently, to behave differently, and not just to acknowledge their own biases or recognize their own biases, but to actually take active steps to mitigate. And I think that's really important. It's not only acknowledging that bias exists in the world, it's figuring out what you do about that matters.
And I like the fact that you're talking about aligning, and I think that is the best practice as you're bringing forward training into the organization, that you say, okay, what is the behavior and mindset changes that we can have? What are some of these rituals and things that we can put in place as we create awareness? What and I know we're getting to the end here. This has been a great conversation, but what are some of the challenges or obstacles that you've had to overcome, and how did you approach that?
Wow.
Share one or two. I know that's a big question for the end.
That is a big question, because any day you get me, I could probably give you a different set of challenges that we're facing. One of the things that I think most folks in my role in different organizations constantly struggle with is a resource challenge. Just the challenge of time, money, people, intellectual capital. There's we're DE&I is, I think, by design, a resource constrained environment. And so, one of the things that I've been working on and thinking about very deeply is how do we tap into knowledge and expertise and candidly resources in other parts of our organization to help bring our vision to life, right? One of the things I'm constantly preaching inside of my team is we don't have to climb every hill all by ourselves. We don't have to fix every problem by ourselves. And so I think figuring out how you tap into an organization is one of the key challenges. We'll always face it, but we're trying to be, again, very thoughtful and intentional about how we address that. And again, kind of going back to my roots kind of in the core of business operations, one of the things that I also challenge my team to think about is something I heard from a very early mentor of mine, which is great organizations never let good ideas go unfunded. So if we're not getting the resources that we need, we probably haven't convinced people that our ideas are all that good. And so, we need to be thinking about that. How do we make that case? Because I have yet to meet a great business leader who's not willing to fund great ideas. They just, that's what great business leaders do, is they find great ideas and then they pour money into them. And so that's the challenge in front of us, and that's that's how we're chasing that opportunity.
I love it. Thank you. What an incredible note to end on. I mean, and at first I was like, oh, wow, resource constrained, environment and function. And I was like, ooh, but then you just said it, and that is so true. Great organizations do not let great ideas go unfunded. You're absolutely right. And I thank you so much for that. So I want to just, thank you, Germaine, for giving us this time and the best practice and the best practices and nuggets that you've shared. And really, your experience, both but also being in a DEI leader from Clorox, I mean, you've been able to jump in, lean in, and just get your organization going at a very fast pace. So almost taking away the excuses of, oh, we're new in this journey and don't know what to do. But it sounds like if you're a business leader and you have a plan and you have the process, you'll be able to navigate this. So I want to thank you again today for your time, and thank those of you that have joined us for this DEI best practice session for members only. And this is just so folks know, this will be available on your portals and you'll be able to get these nuggets at any time. So thank you again, Germaine.
Thank you. Appreciate the time, Pam.
Okay.